Let me show you some of the more advanced features of the timer, which set it apart from just a standard timer in the darkroom, both for film and paper processing. At the moment I'm in channel 2, but I can select a different channel, specifically say for paper development. By doing that, I'll press and hold the programming button. The word CHAN comes up on the display, and I simply move it to say channel 3, which is going to be my default paper processing channel. By pressing the clear button, that sets it, and pressing the program button in a quick press takes me into programming mode, indicated by the flashing lights. Now for this first time, which is when I do the basic development for the print, I can do factorial development. If I press this button here, this brings up a special series of compensation modes. If I go down, I can do temperature compensation, which I'll come on to later. And if I go up, I can do factorial compensation. So this means that when I'm starting the sequence, I want the total development time of the print to be 6 times that of when it first emerges. So I'm going to store that, and I'm going to come out of the program. In use, I start the sequence off and I wait for the print to show the first signs of tone. When those first signs appear, I press the play button a second time. The word fact comes on the display and it calculates the remaining developing time to give me overall factorial 6 development. This is something that Ansel Adams and others have written about in their books, and is also in my book Way Beyond Monochrome. And when you get to the end of the sequence, it will be ready for the next time, in this case 25 seconds. And when I start that, it'll just simply count down. And if I do nothing else, it'll simply count down those 25 seconds and stop. But again, if I press this button here, it'll do factorial. So you can incur the factorial development by the second press, and if you don't make a second press, it simply will do the time that's programmed into the unit. Let's look at some features that help advanced film development, and I'm going to show you how to do temperature compensated film development. You need the probe connected, which is obviously essential, and we're going to program up a different channel. So I'm going to press and hold the button. I'm going to select channel 1, and now I'm going to enter program mode. If I press the special button in the corner, I can select either nothing or factorial, or I can select temperature compensation, and there's 2 levels, and I'm going to select the second level, which is the standard one for most films. Having selected that, I cancel out of that, and that is now stored in, and the plus and minus indicator shows up on the display to say that this programming step will be temperature compensated. When I actually come out of the program entirely and actually start playing it, what actually happens is every 30 seconds the temperature probe is sampled and the time base in the process master is altered so that it compensates the overall developing time for the developer temperature. Now, the fact it does it every 30 seconds allows the option of doing intermittent inversions on a tank and putting the probe in through the lid, rather than a permanent fixture of actually sticking this through the lid. The alternative, of course, is something like a Jobo processor, which is temperature compensated itself, but you can also put this in the water bath and measure the water bath temperature as a good indicator of the developer inside the tank. So I'm going to stop that and just show you a simulated sequence of how this can work in practice. In this simulation, I'll show you how this works in practice. Let's say I've got my developer in here and I allow the probe to sit in there for about a minute. Now the probe doesn't instantly accommodate a temperature change. It has a thermal inertia and it takes a little while for it to respond to a change in temperature. So whilst that settles, I'll get everything ready and my film's in my tank. So what I would do is immediately take that out for a second, pour the developer in and start the process. With the process started, I could then do my initial agitation and then take the lid off and put the probe back in, so it has about 10 seconds to settle before the next measurement is taken, which is done on the half minute. Now, all this time the temperature sensor is getting used to the tank and the situation, and at 30 seconds there's a beep and it takes a reading. So what I can immediately do is, if I'm doing 30-second agitation, I can now invert the tank a few times, take the lid off and put the probe back and wait for the minute to come up. And I continue through that, taking readings every 30 seconds, and it gives you the option of either doing 30-second or 1 minute agitations by inversion. So there's the minute. It's heralded with a double beep rather than a single beep. Again, I can now start doing my agitations and put the probe back in. And you can do that, and as the temperature changes over time, if the room's cold or hot, the time base on this will just slowly change and accommodate the temperature changes and give you overall the same overall development as you would have had with a very highly accurate temperature bath, etc. And whilst it's doing that, the little plus and minus indicator is flashing away. If you do something silly and remove the sensor, when it next takes the next reading, it'll give you a warning. So in 10 seconds time, when it takes a reading, it'll see something's wrong, and hopefully puts the word prob for probe, and then starts flashing the exclamation mark to say that your probe is missing. That also happens if the probe gets outside its temperature range of sensible developing temperatures. There are some other things that are quite useful on the Process Master. When you come out of a program, the program times are always put on the display, but you can override them manually by just increasing or decreasing the time. But as soon as the program ends, or you press the clear button, it will take you back to the programmed in numbers. And that's quite a useful way of just doing a one-off. The other thing you can do is a run-on mode, where it starts counting down and then up rather than onto the next step of the sequence. If I go into programming mode, and let's reduce the time of this first step to something sensible, let's say about 20 seconds. And then set the run on mode, which is done by the pause button. The pause button toggles between run on, as you saw on the display there, and run off. So let's select run on, which is also indicated by the little indicator up here with the two arrows, and let's come out of the program and run it. So whilst it's counting down, it's in seconds, and when it gets to the end of the sequence, it will continue to count, but then start counting up. So it'll go 10, 9, 8, 7. You'll notice that with the beep on, for the last 10 seconds of any step, it beeps to give you an indicator. And now it starts counting back up again. I'm going to stop that for a second and bring it back to the first step. But this time when I run it, I'm going to combine it with the percentage. So let's run it and then do it in percentage terms. So for instance, with E6 processing or C41 processing, if you develop several films one after the other, you have to increase the time by 10 or 15%. So now you can see it's counting down in percentage, and so for the second or third or fourth film going through the same chemistry, you can now stop the time when you get to the right percentage as it runs on and accommodates the chemistry that's slowly getting worn out. One other little subtlety is the fact that the run-on, run-off feature can be programmed against each of the steps individually. So if I clear the program out and go back to step 1, the run-on feature is working, but when I play that and then abort that to get to the second step does not have it, and therefore the indicator is not shown.